Hello everyone and welcome to this technique tutorial about model making and model curation. So in this lecture I will mainly talk about three chapters. The first one is about dismantling a model that I have made from last year's my Master of Architecture exhibition to give you a sense about how you organizing how the components is organized behind a kind of intricate final model exhibition and what you can follow step by step to assembly each component together. The second one is mainly about model photography and how you could treating your the result you got from the photograph into a kind of Photoshop to achieve a final rendering a realistic style of the graphic styles. And finally, some nice precedents, mainly from architecture companies, about successful model experiments, model curations, and inspirations. Yeah, we start from so the model that I was making from for this exhibition model is mainly can be extruded into three main parts. So in the very top is the architecture pavilion situating on the roof on the top of it, and then you will have a planes layer which represent the topography layers where the model is situated, and they have an option. They have an option choices at the bottom, saying is that if you can design your own standing of your model to, in my situation I was designing it to making the gesture of the standing also echoing back to the gesture of the model, so making becomes a more unified unity. But in other situations you can always just choosing to making a big boxes where your model can just land it and lift it for the best view for your audience. So the curation of my final model making started from a very quite simple study models showing on the right side. So at the moment, I was just using like a hand folding cardboard to testify the final figures of the model and thinking about how I can assemble them together. And I think it's leading to a kind of idea that so I definitely would need a much more structural available skeleton system to holding everything, and I might need to have another skin layers like might be represented as a cardboard here to apply on the skeleton to assembly as a final figures as what I achieved at the left side final figure. So the technique I was choosing at the moment is to using laser cutting, which is come from the decision is coming from because most of the structure features that I had is to showing a very thin and very intricate steel frame. So in that situation, if you're trying to cutting like thin pieces, um, laser cutting probably become your best choices to achieve that to achieve that effect. So the left, I've just give you a quite quick glance about the left two images are the AutoCAD files I was using for the laser cutting, and the middle two images are how it working in the process. Any other ways, I mean, probably for most of the scenarios that you can might working on manual cutting, that's cutting by hand of components, could might be a better choices for your situations right now. And I think it's also a way much more easier and achievable place when you're trying to make a larger model, especially like a 1 to 50 or 1 to 100 technical models. Yeah, so this is the I mean the assembly process of my model is relatively quite the simple. The toolkit I was using, it was not it's not fancy at all. What I do is to, in most of the times, gluing all the sticks I got from the laser cutting result, and somehow when you're treating with kind of very thin tiny sticks and trying to gluing them together, mostly you're using uhu glues, but you probably somehow also need to take the help from the super glues to help it to stick to make the structure more stable. Yeah, another main chapter or aspects of my model making process is to think about how you treat the material. So I think this becomes a quite important part, especially for physical model representation, to think about what is the final texture and the material quality you would like to showing the spatial atmospheres or the design aspects you want to achieve through your designs. So at the moment, a quite one important things for my project is to think about what type of materials qualities that it might be represented if my model is like if my architecture design was like a pavilion exploded to a lot of rainwaters and windy situations. So I was thinking like I might need to think about how I simulating this kind of aged season effect of this kind of natural forces on the material itself. So what I did in this process is to choosing veneer planes I bought from Amazon originally, and I tried to treat them and rubbing this the graffiti powder onto it to kind of simulating this kind of effect of aged idea. So the left one is also like a series of experiments that I have made to testify the different depths and different qualities when you rub it with different forces and different orientations or even on different textures, and it would achieve with different depths and darkness on the material itself. So this is something that is not I mean it's not just you can't just like achieve it or see it when you bought the materials, but it's always need like a very um, careful thinking behind it and making many options of experiments and finally pick up the one that most suits your desire in the model representation. Yeah, so this is the a photo that was when I finally finishing the assembly of the 5 component that I had for that model, and you can definitely see the advantages of a model treatment, that this kind of sensibility of like aged material definitely when you putting them together, 5 of them give you kind of unified atmosphere like a series or a set instead of like individual individual components that simply be grasped from art shop or ECA material shop. They can something like a limited options of material qualities behind it. The last component of the model making was the planes design, which is can be which is showing as interesting precedence for you to think about how you can represent your model eventually. So as I mentioned before, the initial idea that I had that I choosing the metal bar as the standing material is because it's the gesture of the metal bar can also be a kind of echoing back to um the gesture and the component of the model that I have at the moment. But in other but in other situations, you can also have as I said, have a box to just lift it to the best view point, probably like 1.2 meters or 1 to 3 meters as the best viewpoint for the human audience to looking through it. Yeah, and I think finally I would like to there's 2 images I want to showing to you is like a pre-model making digital representation that I was playing in the rendering engine of the final appearance of the model with material quality, standing, and also like a experiment of the shadow effect it might showing eventually as a kind of digital curation, and finally how it leading to a physical expression model like breathed from the original digital experiment one. I think the interesting thing here is that I think for especially for architecture representation, it is can be tricky to always treating the digital representation and the final physical model as 2 separate parts, because normally you can always represent your graphics as a model model effect or model qualities. And your model photos can always be a supporting materials for your digital and final representations in your portfolio. So it's always a kind of something interacting and influence each other. And you can also see that the final physical model definitely showing much more details and textures that you might not expected when you playing it in the digital rendering engines. So there was always a process of experiment when you making the model in the halfway, and you might realize you can add in more enrichment and adding more details onto it. So I will always encourage you to start to just start your model making process before you finally have a clear idea about what I'm gonna do. Yeah, so I also have so this is like a series of photos. I was recording my model when I also in the process of making them. So this two set are like two images like showing why firstly finishes assembly of the skeleton and just simply putting them underneath the sunlight and coming with the shadows, and it immediately gives people a sense of feeling of what is your technical structure or language behind it and how you can make it. But it still give people a totally different sense feeling when you actually capturing a photo after everything is assembled and the final image of it. But it's just showing different qualities when you thinking about recording a model in the process and in the final stage. And again, so this is can be another nice technique to record your model hierarchy by taking a series of photos and then Photoshop them together to showing the different components when you making in the process of your making through your model, and give people a sense of feeling of what is the foundation, what is the inner component, and what is the outer skin of your model component, and especially your design hierarchy structures. And also taking a photo of your model and Photoshop the contact images surrounding it can immediately transforming your physical model into a kind of real scenario situation. So it becomes another idea that you can using your the recording of your physical model become part of your rendering or perspective representations. So in this one especially, what I did was to just Photoshop human figures on the ground floor of the building of the project, to showing that you can using the ground places as like a gathering playground, and it's immediately give people a kind of vivid scenario when you treating the photo of your model as a kind of image figures. And also shadow can be also quite important experiment process when making a model. So these two images was I didn't have a kind of intention before I playing with it. That was just one night I setting a spotlight in front of the model and thinking what type of shadow qualities this might be bring to the representation of the final expression. And yeah, and I think that becomes the trigger that's finally leading me to making this like a key images for the model representations. And what I did is thinking that because I have a lot of explored um, a component and penetrative gestures on the model, and which leaving a quite interesting projection in the shadows itself as well. So what I did at the moment is to making each of the model underneath the spotlight and capture the model itself with the shadow, and then I playing with the scale and the position finally in the Photoshop to achieve the kind of idea that to achieve that kind of idea of the final component gesture of between different blocks of the model, and which is also, I think, yeah, this is kind of advantages that you probably won't expect it before you actually start to play with the shadow and I mean the effect of the model recording. Okay, yeah, and in the next chapter, I want to using this precedence, which is the student project by down two student from a German school called German architecture school called Braunschweig, and what they did is to make using physical model becomes a well realistic and and rendering representations through a photography record of their model making. So yeah, before I starting everything, I would like to give you a common knowledges about camera aperture and how you this might affect directly affect how you capture the figures of your models. So some of you might be familiar with it, but in general, if you're playing with the aperture of the camera from a smaller one to a larger one, you normally get a much more clear satellite figures to a more focused figure, which have a much more blurry and unclear background and the front side. So both of them have different advantages and usage when you're playing with different model photographies. So the smaller um, aperture, and normally when you're thinking about making a kind of bird view overall model making photography, it might be a better options to capture everything in details. But when you somehow moving to the detail of the models, you eventually have to choosing a kind of larger aperture, which only allowing to you to focusing on one component of the model at one moment. So that can be annoying. It can be annoying aspects when you're trying to using it as a final representation of all the details that you had in the model. So what you might can do is capturing, like moving the different depths in different layers and capturing the different layers of the model and then Photoshop them together in the Photoshops. I will now using this precedence as a nice process to explain this idea how they achieve their final effect in through this through the physical model recording process. So what they have already get there is a very large scale 1 to 100 delivery model, which gives a lot of advantages to recording both inside and outside. And at the moment, this photography is mainly focusing on the outside relationship between the street view and the kind of transparent, semi-transparent, interesting model facade they were designed together and capturing the tension in between of them. So when they start to kind of curating this kind of final idea of taking a straight view, they're making quite clever idea. So just playing with the like the historical fabric existing buildings with colorful cardboard, but only making the front face of it. So this becomes another clever technology that you can also grasp in your own model making. You don't necessarily have to um, making all the details in the model, but sometimes when you're just making the front face, taking the photo of the front face of the building, sometimes can just be a tiny skin of the front facade of the building, then allowing you to taking a photo in the middle side. Yeah, so this model, this photo showing kind of backside, but how he kind of curating the final effect of the model. So what you can making is more enrichness, is the street views. You can add in more food cabins, trees, sitting places to give you more enriched, lively atmospheres. But any other places that is like outside the screens, like a, it's also like a filmmaking process. Any other things is not captured in the frame that you captured here can be simplified or ignored at that moment. So yeah, this is the framing the first framing stage that is thinking about what to capture in the final representations. And as I mentioned before, when you're trying to capture a kind of smaller scale model making, you might be limited by the aperture, which you possibly have a kind of blurry background and a blurry front compared with the focusing main body point that you had in here. So they have a kind of photographing technique you can also accept from this project is to setting the perspective of camera, fixed it, and taking two photos with different focusing depths uh, of the model. So what they're doing here is to taking two photos and cutting the figures of the front side and the back side, and then Photoshop them together to give people a more clear scenario and much higher quality um, photography that which kind of delivering a kind of a rendering and realistic atmosphere coming with it. And by simply playing with the what you can see from here, the contract between the front building and the back front building, and just adding another probably a simplified, very simple sky figures is definitely immediately give people a very enriched atmosphere about like a realistic qualities through your model makings. Okay, so yeah, in the next, I have a series of also quite successful model makings that mainly done by architecture companies and also some student works. So this is the first one, brick house done by architects Caruso St. John. Is making quite simple cardboard models to repeat or as an experiment of the final effects, as you can see a realistic photo on the right side. And you can definitely see the advantages of making a physical model at this stage as an experiment of the final effect of how this kind of very intense, strong sunlight can be captured through what depths, through the depths of the skylight, and how the skylight, how the natural lighting impact the interior atmosphere of the building. And you can definitely see the similarity between them, and this give you an advantage is that even though you don't have to necessarily making a rendering image through the rendering engine or taking a physical realistic model, but through the experiment of the physical model, you can still achieve similar lighting qualities as the representation of your architecture design. Yeah, another Caruso syndrome project, which is in a gallery spaces using also the idea of the skylight, but is giving people a more equal and blurry lighting qualities in the whole spaces. But it's still, you can, by creating this kind of large openings above your physical model and playing with the natural lighting, or you're setting your own spotlight above it, you can still achieve this kind of very nice and very realistic lighting qualities through a smaller size of the model with a very accurate photography technique. Yeah, another precedence can be nice to see if you are thinking about using lighting transparent material, and you can just achieve a kind of similar lighting qualities that you want to achieve in your design with kind of relatively more simple materials that you can assemble in them in the physical model, and playing with the natural lighting to capturing the idea of the shadow and lighting. Another very lovely precedence from Peter Zumthor's Serpentine Pavilion design a couple years ago, which you can see is like a very simple mass relationship of a courtyard, but it gives a very intimate, very strong feeling of the lighting and the dark side atmosphere in the pavilion, which is, I believe most of you can achieve a similar quality if you're playing with your model with the correct or suitable materials and the similar lighting setting qualities. Yeah, finally, this is a project I really like from ETH Zurich. It's also a student project, but you can see the logic behind this quite simple, which is using a kind of treated timber material and using it everywhere, and making the composition and assembly of the interior space of his design project. But suddenly, when you setting all the things and hand making every textures in the physical model and setting with the correct lighting qualities, it's immediately showing up all the material details and the texture benefits that you can achieve through a real physical one, and very intimate, very enriched details by taking a photography of the model. Okay, yeah, the Luxor 2 ones from my master thesis as well. I was just showing kind of idea that you can always taking your models, also coming with the drawings that you had with the section or a plan to making the physical one and the digital drawing together as a beneficial to each other as a representation way. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your attention today for this short introduction for model curation. And I think finally I would just like to give you a couple of nice references that I also like to looking through while making the models. So the top threes are um, so this is the Cardoso St. John architecture company project. You can find a lot of so they love to using a physical model as an exploration process. You can find tons of interesting precedents of architecture model done by them, and also they have a archival Zurich ATH project, which is very nice architecture school with high quality standard model making skill students. Yeah, and also at the same time, Instagram can be also nice media if you find the correct account for a collection of different style for models. So they have an Edinburgh exhibition account for architectural model representation, and also exhibition is curated by I think by one of the master students. So but it is a collection of nice architectural projects across in the different years in the Isala. And also ETH Architecture Archive has also Instagram account, and they have another very lovely Instagram account. It's just called Model Architecture, with a collective of architectural projects all over the world from students and also from companies, and I'm sure you can find a lot of very inspirable project in their account. Yeah, so thank you for your attention for attending this model mating lecture, and I'm really excited to see all your final representation in the assembly at the end. Thank you.